We don't call people on their cliche bullshit because we don't want to make it weird or awkward or seem confrontational. So instead, we just let people walk around in their banal incubators, metaphorically getting into cars wired to explode.
Some people aren't going to like you. I remember thinking like, yeah, I'm definitely not going to stand up in front of an audience and be like, I command you to whatever.
Oh, well, you had to be there. No, I didn't, because that's why we invented stories. So I, in fact, didn't gotta be there.
What is up, rhetoric nerds? Welcome to Rhetorically Speaking, a podcast about how we use language and how language uses us. I am your hostess with the mostest, Lee Pierce, she, they pronouns, hater of Nazis, and loather of cliches. For the last few episodes, we've been doing kind of a variation on a theme. I pick some kind of cultural artifact, a movie monologue, or a scene from a TV show, or a montage of clips from a podcast, and I harp on about a particular cliche that the artifact puts into circulation. I will say that while I am a lover of pop culture, I don't necessarily love this approach all the time. After a while, it gets kitschy. Also, I just like to pontificate and expound endlessly about all of my thoughts without anchoring them in anything relatable. Hopefully you could hear the air quotes there. But my producer, the inimitable Cal Hogue, convinced me that other people didn't have nearly the tolerance for my rambling that I imagined they did. He was correct, obviously, because I trained him. Do as I say and all that. So today, I'm going to hit you with a little bit of pop culture, but also we're going to go nonfiction today, because I really want to dig into the harm that cliches do. Not any particular cliche, but just cliches as a general way of thinking and speaking that are derivative, trite, hackneyed, platitudinal, whatever synonym you want to choose. And nothing says harm like the Nazis. That's right, Nazis loved cliches. Literally and figuratively, cliches are how the Holocaust happened. Before I embark on this somewhat dark rhetorical history lesson, though, I'm going to give you a little dose of pop culture from one of my favorite television shows, The Blacklist, starring my all-time fave, James Spader, as Raymond Reddington, who's a kind of Hannibal Lecter character, but he's more crime boss and less fava beans and Chianti, but similarly works with the FBI to catch elusive international criminal masterminds. All right, so we are mid-season 4 in this scene, and Reddington is giving advice to someone on how to kill someone else in a way that not only gets the job done, i.e., person is good and dead without possibility of retaliation, but also sends a message that anyone else who gets any wise ideas will meet a similar fate. I know this is kind of off topic, but I think I would be a really good crime boss if I didn't, believe people were inherently good. Okay, the scene. Take it away, Cal.
Might I suggest something in broad daylight? Perhaps a nice car bombing. A cliche, I know, but cliches work. That's how they get to be cliches.
I actually stumbled on this scene after I started publishing Rhetorically Speaking, and as soon as the word cliche came out of Spader's mouth, I was fucking ecstatic because it proves how goddamn right I am about everything. Cliches are essentially weapons of mass destruction. They're rhetorical WMDs. Yes, the object actually doing the killing is the car bomb. That's like the topic or the thing. But the idea behind the car bomb's effectivity is that it is a cliche, which Reddington describes as something that is both obvious and also works. The car bomb has been done so many times, precisely because no matter how many times it is done, it continues to work. No matter how many times a car bomb kills someone, either in fiction or in real life, most people don't go around guarding themselves against car bombs. They're deadly, essentially, because they hide in plain sight. Cliches made up of words and phrases work pretty much the same way. No matter how many times someone says, let's say, oh, face-to-face communication is so much better than texting. A cliche that literally couldn't be less true. It continues to have traction because no one has learned to guard themselves against it. So it just keeps doing more and more damage because, one, people haven't been trained to call it out as bullshit. And that's so frustrating because people know that it's bullshit. There's no one way of communicating that is ever always better than another one. Even my almost 70-year-old father, who constantly complains about how people being on their cell phones, will still tell me how much he prefers sending text messages to certain people who talk way too long on the phone. He will also be the first person to complain if I pull out my phone to look something up during a movie because, quote, in his day, people had to actually just figure it out on their own. And then be the first person to text me and ask me to look up a telephone number for some online gun manufacturer. We all know that there are plenty of situations in which face-to-face is great and terrible, and so it is true as well for text messaging and email and podcasting and handwritten letters. But when we hear people say face-to-face communication is so much better than texting, it has circulated so much that we either just silently disagree or fall automatically into agreement. Students will even write papers on this nonsense about how technology has ruined their communication. And then when I say, do you actually believe that? They're like, I don't know, kind of. And I'm like, then why did you fucking write it down if you don't even believe it? And then their eyes glaze over and they stop listening. When people say shit like that to me, I look them dead in their souls and I say, for whom? For whom is face-to-face better than anything else? For introverts? For people with processing challenges or learning challenges? For people with disabilities? For people with social anxiety? For people who are in positions of power where they want to set the agenda and ramble on for as long as they want without consequence? For whom exactly is face-to-face communication better than a text message? We don't call people on their cliche bullshit because we don't want to make it weird or awkward or seem confrontational. So instead, we just let people walk around in their banal incubators, metaphorically getting into cars wired to explode. Not to mention the actual issue of car bombs and how easy it is for those of us who live in a country where we don't have to worry about a white van blowing up next to the farmer's market on a regular basis. But I'll leave that alone for now. It's upsetting. Instead, let's talk about the Holocaust. So long story short, the Holocaust happens. And working underneath Adolf Hitler as his right-hand man was a guy by the name of Adolph Eichmann. Hitler did not survive the ending of World War II, but Eichmann did. And in 1963, Eichmann was tried for war crimes in Jerusalem. In the words of the prosecutor, quote, "There was only one man who had been concerned almost entirely with the Jews, whose business had been their destruction, whose role in the establishment of the iniquitous regime had been limited to them. That was Adolph Eichmann." In attendance at the trial was Hannah Arendt, a philosopher and journalist, also a Jew, who managed to escape Europe during Nazi occupation. Arendt sat through the entire Eichmann trial and wrote a lengthy article for The New Yorker. You can still find it online if you want to read the whole thing. Arendt, who is brilliant, unsurprisingly made a lot of brilliant observations. Foremost among them was the degree to which Eichmann's ability to put 6 million people to their horrifying deaths depended on his inability to think in any nuanced or creative way about what he was doing. Arendt's report on the trial gave birth to the phrase, the banality of evil, which means quite simply that the most depraved acts are authorized by the most superficial ways of thinking. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Arendt's report to that effect. It's long, so assume I'm still Arendt until I tell you otherwise. I will not be doing an accent. The German text of the taped police examination, which was conducted by Captain Less between May 29, 1960, and January 17, 1961, and each page of which was corrected and approved by Eichmann, demonstrates that the horrible can sometimes be not only ludicrous, but downright funny. Some of the comedy cannot be conveyed in English, because it lies in Eichmann's heroic fight with the German language, which invariably defeats him. The real point here is that officialese became his language because he was genuinely incapable of uttering a single sentence that was not a cliché. The judges were right when they finally told the accused that all he had said was empty talk, except that they thought the emptiness feigned, and believed that the accused wished to cover up other thoughts, which were not empty but hideous. This supposition seems refuted by the striking consistency with which Eichmann, despite his rather bad memory, constantly repeated, word for word, the same stock phrases and self-invented cliches in referring to every event or incident that was of some importance to him. When he did succeed in constructing a sentence of his own, he thereupon repeated it until it became a cliché. Whether he wrote his memoirs in Argentina or in Jerusalem, whether he talked to the police examiner or to the court, what he said was always the same, expressed in the same words. The longer one listened to him, the more obvious it became that his inability to speak was closely connected with an inability to think. That is, to think from the standpoint of somebody else. No communication with him was possible, not because he lied, but because he was surrounded by the most reliable of all safeguards against the words of others, or even the presence of others, and hence against reality as such. Okay, I'm back to being me now. So I just love this because it really, these were Nazis we're talking about, the truly worst scum of the earth collection of human beings. And like Arendt says, we expect there to be some kind of deep driving thought process behind what they did. And instead, what we find is just literally their inability to think about what they were doing was how they were able to do something so awful. That's why it's the banality of evil, right? Obviously, plenty of people go about their days using all manner of cliches and don't turn into Adolph Eichmann. The point for Arendt, and also for me, isn't that banality automatically yields evil. It's that evil is not possible without the insulation from critical thought that banality provides. Become a little less cliche with each new episode of Rhetorically Speaking, dropping every Tuesday. Be sure to hit subscribe and leave a review on whatever app you use to listen. Don't be a digital freeloader, you're better than that.